Hi guys, Mimi G here. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. I am a sewing influencer and content creator, and today I'm just going to share a really quick video on how I transfer my dots, notches, and all these markings from my patterns onto my fabric. I initially started using these tools when I draft my own patterns. I bought this little punch tool because it's really helpful when you draft your patterns or you're working with a sloper to have a hole where your bust point is, and also for any pivoting that you're doing. And so it's much easier, especially because on my sloper or patterns that I'm working on, the paper tends to be a little thicker. And so it's harder to put like your pin through there and try and mark, and that's pain. And so I started using this little puncher, and it changed the game when I realized that I could also use this on my commercial patterns to help me transfer all the dots and markings that are on these pattern pieces onto my fabric. So this is a punch tool, and then I use a notcher to notch my notches. Let me show you how I use them. Okay, so once I have my pattern piece cut out, I want to make sure that I can transfer all of the dots and markings that are on my pattern piece onto my fabric, and I want to be able to do it easily. And so what I like to do is I use my punch hole to go ahead and make a hole wherever I see that there is going to be a marking needed. So in this case, I've already done these, but I'm going to basically just show you how I do it. You just place it and you punch, and it creates a little hole, right? That makes it really easy for you to be able to transfer those markings. And I do that for every hole that I see. This is probably where the collar is going to end. This is obviously for my sleeve. I also want to make sure that I punch out at the end of my dart. These are where my pockets are going to go, so I definitely want to make sure that I punch those out. And then I take my pattern notcher and I just make a notch wherever I see a notch. And so what I really like about that is that as you're cutting or marking, I should say, when you're going to snip into your fabric so that you can transfer your notches, this gives you sort of a guide of exactly how much you should be notching so that you don't notch too much, but also it just makes it really clean. So I like to make sure that I notch out any visible notch that's already on my pattern piece. One other thing that I really like to do is sometimes along a dart, I don't want to have to transfer the entire line. And so that can be a little tricky too, is trying to transfer this onto your fabric. So what I do instead is I just make myself some hole punches along that line. I space them out probably about an inch. And I do this on both dart legs. And that way, when I place this on my fabric, I can easily transfer those lines onto my fabric. I like to do the same thing on all my pattern pieces, the sleeves specifically, because we have a lot of dots, right? These are markings that are going to match up to the armhole on your bodice. So I always do those, right? I punch these holes out, I do my little notches, and then also here, for example, on this sleeve, I know that I have to slash here because I have a placket that's going to go there. And so I will punch out the top of it, make my notches at the bottom, make my notches at the bottom of the pleat. And I also punch out the hole where the pleat ends so that I know where that's going to end and I can mark it easily onto my fabric. I also like to do that on places like this where I have a cuff. So I will punch out the holes. And then I will find the size that I cut, obviously, and I will punch out that size. And then where my button is going to go, what I do is I mark the beginning and end of that buttonhole with a dot. And then I can transfer that to my fabric very easily. I'm going to grab my pattern piece. I'm going to use my pattern weights to place this down and hold my pattern piece in place. You're going to go ahead and cut around your pattern as usual. And then using my marking tool, I can easily just make a little dot or marking through those dots that I went ahead and punched out. Now before I would sort of just pin through my paper, lift my paper, make my marking. But since I started using my punch tool, it just makes it so much easier and much faster. And I will transfer these dots and markings everywhere that I need to on my fabric very easily. I know that this is my button. So I'm gonna show you how I do that also for my darts. Okay, now if you remember, I went ahead and punched some holes along the dart lines, and so that's gonna make it really easy for me to just follow where those dots are and make my little markings with my marking pen. There are a lot of different ways for you to transfer markings. I mean, you could use thread, you could use those, what are those called? The paper with the tracing papers or whatever. You could use those, but I always find that this is very accurate and super fast for me to make all of the markings that I need to on my pattern pieces. And then for notches, since I've already used my notcher to mark the notches, I can go ahead and just make those snippets. And now I can easily see my guideline for sewing that dart. And I know exactly where my pocket is gonna go. All right, guys, I hope you found that useful. You can click for both of these items in my description box below. Let me know if you've used this or if you found it helpful. I know that this makes transferring markings for me much easier, so I hope that it will help you. Again, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Peace.